studies. I will just resume where we stopped. So, who should be selected to the academies? Now, one of the, again, requests from my side will be that this is typically the view from the academy point of view. And I would, of course, like to have your feedbacks on how it looks in the LSSs, how it looks like in the SSC, so that we have a full picture. And then eventually one day we can sort of lock the whole thing into one complex and proceed with a, so to say, foolproof methodology. So now, if you agree with the fact that performance should not be the one and only or even the most contributing factor in the talent selection at a particular age group, then we have to formulate the second part of this thought. If you said A, then we have to say B, and then we have C, and then we have to complete the whole thing. Otherwise it will, again, hang in the air without any implementation. So, what should be other or alternative variables, factors, clusters, whatever you call it, in order to properly assess the potential, not the performance. Because performance is kind of simple. You clock timing or you got the placement and you are in. However, the suggestion here is that when we do talent profile and we do take a decision on who is supposed to be taken in, then there are other factors which has to be considered. And I would again like to know and to have a, at least, interaction session with you on few of those items. Now, if we approach, again, I repeat, we are in under 14 age group, just there. So, competition performance, we cannot scrap it. We should have it still, because this is one way or another, is another sort of base point, all right. Whether we use it as criteria or not is a different story. It has to be there. Now, what are the other ones? The major one, and the one which basically opens up your wishes of what you want to have, I put here as performance potential. What is it about? First of all, it is what you want to have in that kid, which is to be selected. How you express it, it is up to you in a way. I'll give you examples, but I want again you to make your notes to give your suggestions. All right, what is it, performance potential? It is always a tussle between scientists and coaches, well, you know that. The scientists will say, okay, if something is not measurable, then it is an issue. And you will say, fine, okay, there are things which I cannot measure as a coach. All right, for instance, as a coach, I require from a kid some sort of, tactical literacy or behavioral kind of things. How the kid acts, how the kid moves, what is the footwork, is there an eye-hand coordination, is there some sort of, extrapolation, reaction, anything. Some will say, I want to see that the kid has a sense of rhythm. We are talking jumps, for instance. Rhythmic structure. Leg work again. Something which is a potentially thing or a potential thing which will convert that kid and help you converting that kid into a champion. Sometimes you can measure it, sometimes you cannot. That is why, and we keep pushing in that direction with our coaches here at Nadia, that please make it in black and white. What is it you are looking for? All right? If it is measurable or non-measurable, it's a different story. If something is easily measurable, then fine. If something is not measurable, then it also can be expressed somehow. If you cannot measure the rhythmic structure, you can say, still give your kind of expert assessment. Out of the scale of 10, And when it's with rhythmic structure, you can put 8 or you can put 4. And I will agree with that. And I will not ask you to give me the measurable standards because it may not be available, may not be developed. However, if you sit 3, 4, 5 coaches, theoretically, and observe the same kid and mark out of 10 that particular ability which you're looking for, there will be some sort of an agreement and some sort of an accord between you guys coaches. So you take the average mark and then it is your mark. And then imagine that if each one of those is marked as maximum 10 points, and a winner or a gold medalist or silver medalist in Kelmahakum will get 10 and 9, and then the 5th position will get 5 and the 6th position will get 4, there still be some points for the ones who are not in the medal bracket. However, when you assess your performance potential, there will be also 10s and there will be also 2s. So someone who is now currently winning may somehow score only 2 in the performance potential, which you actually will signify. And that will be your way of assessing what you need, what you want. So it can be anything. See, there is no such thing in here so far as anthropometry, but it could be included in performance potential. It could be included in physical attributes. Basketballers, volleyballers, that requires height. Okay. And I was talking to my coaches here in the academy, and we were kind of joking about that thing and say, guys, I know, even if nothing is there, but there is a 7 feet tall kid, you will still take that kid. And you will not hear no from anyone. But then it also has to be somehow defended and protected. Say, okay, because that kid may be completely raw. There may be no performance at all. The physicality, there will be no runs, no jumps, no nothing, because many people are so blown away with those physical fitness tests, which are just good as a baseline, but they may not have value when you do talent identification as such. Skills proficiency, there may be no skills, but there is still a height, or still a body structure, or still some behavioral issues, or things like what we used to discuss with boxing coaches or with wrestling coaches. You need someone with aggressive behavior. So that is something you're looking after. Fine. So we have to put it here and make it a performance potential highest possible scoring point. Then it will not be the way like it is happening quite often. Performing in, not performing out. You will have a say. That's what I want for many years together. That will be your choice, not the list given to you from the top and say, okay, now you do what you want. And you try, and then you say, look, there is no potential, I cannot do anything. Meaning the selection criteria were wrong. That's what I was taking and making it kind of in a joking form, but it is how it works. The policy matters is done that way, that your hands are tied, and then you just have to work with what you were given to, which is not a good idea. You have to be the ones who pick your own talent. Then, obviously, responsibility is also with you. Someone is buying a shirt for you, okay, you wear it. You say, I don't like it, I won't wear it. Same thing here. You won't like perhaps what something will select for you instead of you. But you cannot do a thing, you have to. So we have to change it. Now, other things, that's what I'm saying. Please, think of that as a key to kind of opening something which has been not available to you before. Right? So, performance potential, your own game, your own discipline. Think about what can be a factor as performance potential. Right? Next one, physical attributes. Fine. Height, weight, arm span, something standing, reach, standing jump, anything on earth. It is not necessarily a physical fitness test, because physical fitness tests also has their own limitations. There are things which are genetically determined, there are things which are trainable, and unfortunately many of those physical fitness tests are trainable. And when kids and coaches know this battery test, they start preparing their kids to actually perform in that battery. We all know it. There are certain things which are not measurable, so not trainable. genetically determined. Fine, let's stick to that. So these two are opening, as I say, a tank which was not available to you before. Skill proficiency. All right, we are talking about under 14 kids, right? So obviously skill may not be perfect or may not be kind of the one which we want later, but you still can see reception, setting, you know, kind of skills, again, footwork, ability to kind of deliver a punch or something. Again, even if it is not measurable, it is still expert opinion kind of marked. So use that as another criteria which you can benefit from on the later stage. Psychological attributes. I agree, some of you may not really need that. Some sports may not be there. But there are sports which require psychological profiling right at this early age. Why? Again, you take combat. You need certain type of psychological profile. I've known so many kind of brilliant, fantastic boxers, physically fabulous, technically sound. And boxing coaches, we have boxing coaches here, right? Typical words or quote for boxing coaches. I mean, it's a small heart. Meaning, he's not a fighter. Right? Physically, mentally, he goes into the bout, he knows everything. But he is not a brave heart. Or not someone who will go till the end actually to finish the job. Same with other combats. On the contrary, you need a specific profile for shooters, for archers. You need a specific profile for endurance athletes. So if it is done at the beginning, it can help or it can make your life easier in a way on the go. So again, imagine each one has a scale of 10. All right? And the maximum score is, say, 50. So then you can actually play with the contributions. How much from here, how much from here, how much from here, and so on and so forth. So eventually, even a low-scoring kid performance-wise will still be kinda getting higher points from other criteria, and then you can easily explain why that particular kid has been selected. And that's what you want, not what someone wants. And again, however, you also please remember that hopefully when this is happening, and we are discussing that with the secretary, Mr. Butt, so he said that, yeah, okay, fine. If we agree on that, then there will be also coaches' responsibilities if performance is achieved or not. And of course that will be a coach's responsibility. It's always coaches' responsibilities. But then the issue is, if they are actually responsible according to their own kind of standards, or on someone who is actually suggesting that, and then you cannot do what you want. Okay? So, to wrap it up, please again, take your notes, suggest something, whatever for potential, whatever for physical attributes, your own sport. So again, bear in mind that closer to the end of that day, we will suggest that you pick topics for your sort of areas of interest, which eventually at later stage will be converted into some sort of projects and so on and so forth, as was suggested by the VC. Deepak will reiterate on that, and then, of course, we will have a word with Nimesh and with Mansoor Bhai. All right? So, next issue, or next kind of case scenario. Best performers are quite often early specialized, and this often being the only advantage over the others, not their potential. So, again, the TID or talent selection issue we've just discussed. Now, the ones who are starting specializing earlier, of course, are standing kind of better and quicker chances of winning medals, which again brings that performance sort of prematurely. Not when we want it, but when it actually happens. So what is the concern? Where is time for basic training, strength and conditioning, and injury prevention? If you go into specializing early, if you go into specific workouts early, then you're kind of limiting your training time for other issues, which may not be a good idea. So, what are the choices? Quick success or remote long-term wait or long-term plan? Yes, we all know that conditions of your employment and sometimes conditions of your contract are such that depending on what you perform and what you deliver, you may get your extensions, you may get your promotions, and you may get some other stuff. But again, it is also in our best interest to term those things in such a manner that you will not be sort of forced into early high performance delivery. Right? What are the solutions? I'm bringing you back to the basics and age group picking. These are, again, the related issues that if we manage to introduce that long-term development program in which there are only kind of 3-4 picking years, then this also be, in a way, coordinating, supporting that whole approach so that you will not need to pick them on the yearly basis, but only when they are approaching the top age in the age group. However, it is always, not always, but typically will be a conflict. Administrators may not be happy if medals count go down. Obviously, but then we still have an instrument and a mechanism which explains, protects, and kind of keeps your running reasonably smooth. All right? Issue number 3. All right? So, what about it? It has been mentioned already. Younger athletes are typically overexposed to training as compared to mid-age and senior athletes. I will bring you back to that curve or that graph which actually shows the exposure to training and training hours. This is exactly what I'm saying when we are typically overexposing younger kids. Why? They're spending the same time in the training ground as seniors do, which is not a good idea, I again repeat. So what happens typically? Typical approach, everyone on the pitch or a facility or a mat floor are there from 6 in the morning to 8:30 and then say 4:30 to 9:30. We say 7:30. What is the concern? Why every age group is exposed to the same training volume hours? You may well say, okay, we have no issue, we have no other option because they all have to be trained and there are a certain number of coaches, a certain number of athletes, and then well-known athlete to coach ratio, which is a difficult story again in the first place because there's always shortage of coaches. And then when some people are asking a question, okay, why don't you split the groups of and then run separately under 14, under 16, and under 17 and under 19? Then the simple question will come in return. Where do I get that many coaches? I don't have that many coaches. We don't have a luxury of having one separate or dedicated coach per each group or age group. That's why everyone is in. But then there is still an option how to solve it. Let's see and how it can be resolved. So, choice. Overexposing youngsters and underloading seniors. Yeah. Again, if you cannot split the coaching group into age categories, you will still somehow have to arrange that your senior athletes are paid more attention. They do need that. Youngsters, they may not need that much of training time, but still they require attention for safety reasons, for teaching reasons, for other reasons. And then you will say, okay, I still have to keep them all together. Solution? Stick to dose response principle. Otherwise, youngest got nowhere to progress. Youngsters, right? So they will be eventually hitting that plateau. So what is the conflict? Of course, coaches may not be happy for logistics and no early medals. Again, if the administrators agree that early medals is not an option or not an objective, then they will not actually pursue you to achieve that early success. So now, how that can be done? Right. One simple approach which we are suggesting, and yet to be implemented though, is that, for instance, if you have a session like, okay, let's say from 6 to 9, for the round count, it'd be easier to count, and then let's say 4:30 to 7:30, so again, 3 hours here, 3 hours here. Imagine that everyone is in at 6 o'clock, fine. You do warm up, you do whatever you have to do, and then imagine that after 1.5 hours, say 7:30, you get the youngest kids out of the facility. Say, okay, we're done, kids, out. Under 14 group, go ahead. Take your bath, take your breakfast, get ready for the school bus, prepare yourself for kind of schooling. It means that then other two groups of age groups are still in the facility. So under 17 are there, under 19 is there, and then for instance under 21. And then you coaches concentrate more on these two, okay? If that happened at 7:30, then at 8:30 or at 8 o'clock, under 17 group out, you're done. Fine, they go. So then, remaining 1 hour, only the seniors are with you. And then all the coaches' attention is focused on them. Same thing can be done in the evening. So instead of rolling everyone here and watching everyone doing everything they have to do, just split them, sort of let them go earlier. Then the youngsters will get these 1.5 hours per session. You finish what they have to do with them, get lost. Concentrate on the senior ones. So under 17 and another hour, half an hour out, concentrating on the seniors. So that will at least, give some sort of a justice to the senior players. They will be having more attention, deserved, because they need to. Okay, so you can change the plan, you can kind of make it more effective or more intense and so on and so forth. So that same very way, you will then, for instance, 1.5 evening, 1.5 in the morning, so or 1.5 hours per session for under 14 group, right? One session, 1.5 hours. You've got 10 sessions a week, right? It becomes 15 hours per week. You multiply it in the number of weeks you kind of use in training, say 40, 46, whatever the number. Easy way, 40 times 15. How much? We'll be having 600 hours, right? Fine, under 14. Remember we were talking about the progression. Good enough. Next one, you take under 17 group, they will be having 2 hours per session, for instance. 2 per session, 20 per week, and then 45 weeks of training in a year. The percentage, number of hours per week times number of weeks, you'll get roughly about 750 hours per year. Isn't it? And then eventually, senior sort of population, senior athletes, they'll get 3 hours per session, 30 hours per week, 45 weeks per year. You'll get about 1,000, plus minus, right? 1,200 hours per year. So that's exactly what is sort of required to get that progression. So that everyone is in a fair condition with the different volumes of training. And also, we now can have that sort of floating density and floating coach to athlete ratio. If you started with 3 coaches and 30 athletes, it was 1 coach per 10 athletes. 10 youngsters out, 3 coaches per 20. It's 1 per 7. Another 10 out, and then only 10 remaining senior, best, strongest athletes of yours. 10 athletes, 3 coaches. That's what you want. That's what you need. And then it's 1 to 3. 3 athletes to 1 coach. So for 1 hour you have 3 athletes to 1 coach. For 2 hours you have 7 athletes per 1 coach, and at the beginning you have 10 per 1 coach. Fine, but then still you can focus more and narrow that focus on the deserving age group. So that's basically how it can be arranged. Why not? And even if you feel that, okay, I need more time, come on, trust me, they will keep improving even if you are kind of limiting your time with them and exposure with them. So that's what the suggestion is, and the document is basically prepared. The concept is on the paper, it's in black and white. We also discussed that briefly with the secretary, so we are likely to get it introduced in SSG centers. All right, the next one. The other 3 are sort of operational issues. So what's the basic difference? So the previous one were essential, meaning they kind of critical. The others one are operational, meaning that you can actually adjust it one way or another within your basic everyday activity. So what are those? Rehabilitation and injury prevention. That's what typically is in the hands of physios, all right, and strength and conditioning. Developing good eating practices, and then first picking for the top age group performance at the age of 14. Again, if we succeed in proving a fact or proving a position that we do not want them to perform at, say, 11, if it's 12 to 14, that in junior age of an age group, we don't want them to perform. Only once at the top of that group. So how does that work? Prehab and injury prevention, all right? Importance of pre-training health screening and pre-training medical clearance. That's what we were discussing with coaches, with administrators, and that's what I was discussing with Nadiad coaches during this visit. How did that actually happen after COVID? It has to be done more or less on the annual basis after the transitional period when athletes are out for like month vacation or something like that. But it was really important this time around. Why? Because our athletes were grossly, not to say completely sedentary, but they were missing training. They were missing training sessions. Training hours were not that high when they were in isolation. So we needed actually to get them all, first of all, medically cleared, so that to make sure that they are medically fit. Then, comprehensive screening from physio, all right, to make sure that they're not nursing any injuries, and to make sure that when they resume training, those injuries may not be something limiting their performance. Then, involvement into regular strength and conditioning practice and return to practice after injuries only through physio clearance. See, that's the whole idea of prehabilitation, that medical, physio, strength and conditioning clearance back into training. And then the necessity of managing a special rehab group of recovering athletes under designated strength and conditioning trainer. That idea was actually brought in our strength and conditioning department a while ago, that yes, fine. Ideally, at some point, at one day, if we kind of manage to succeed, that we should have, each sport should have a dedicated SNC trainer, and then we have to have another one extra to actually look after the group of athletes who are in rehab, all right? Who are nursing injuries, recovering, having a special program. So then, eventually it will be actually a good idea to have that as a separate group, and then we can progress with injury-free and more or less effective training. The next one, developing good eating practices. All right? Few issues here which our nutritionists are doing a great job in kind of pushing through. That includes limited use of cheap fats and oils. All right? So we all know that, food quality is directly related to the expenses. So less money, less quality of food. cheaper oils, cheaper gravies, this and that, and this and that. So luckily we are now getting into the new level that the expenses will be, or I think already kind of cleared for the academies. It's 480 rupees per head per day, and that only for food, without operational expenses covered, right? So instead, good quality oils, non-fatty gravies, and lean meat, fish and poultry must be in a priority. Because that is something which is, of course, essential, and this is one of the issues which you rightfully may pass back and say, we cannot do many things because of limitations in here. All right. Yeah, so Deepak is adding that they are also changing a process and the other things, and we are also kind of trying to get that as good as possible. Good quality dairy is a must too, including milk, cheese, curd, everything, and there, and that's like what Deepak was also saying, that SAG will be directly in touch with like leading producers of those groceries and other stuff, instead of kind of using the market prices. So hopefully they will get the wholesale ones. High caloric density, low volumes food will help athletes to get the required calories for training through smaller quantities of food. Because that is something which we are always kind of in trouble with. To get the nice and required caloric value, athletes have to eat like big volumes. All right? High quantity. So they eat and then they are sleepy and then they are kind of lethargic and then so on and so forth. So the idea is, and it is actually getting through, again, by the efforts of our nutritionists, we are getting into menus, and those menus are actually being developed for the whole state, so that the money can be utilized nicely and the athlete can get kind of the same caloric value with the less volumes of food, so that they don't feel kind of full stomach, they don't really get bulky and so on and so forth. Because if they keep eating just whatever fits into their stomach, they will kind of not get the actual required caloric value. The next one, essential one, not essential, but rather operational one. First, picking for the top age group performance at 14. In case recruitment in the academy, to the academy has happened at the age of 12, for instance, perhaps it is better to spend extra time in what? So, if you are at 12 getting into the academy, either you were a performer at under 12 or not is a different story, but still, 13 and up to the performance at 14, there'll be a good idea to spend extra time in strength and conditioning, motor learning, skills, technique, and then during extended periods of time, including non-peaking year at 13, but rather first peak at 14 years of age. See, for instance, the issues which we are facing typically with strength and conditioning. You cannot do all what you want in one cycle. So you have to push it, again, in the spiral manner. You do some sort of a job in the first cycle. You continue from that point somewhere in the next one and in the next one. But that also requires time. And when the peaking issue is removed from 1 year or 2 years, it means you don't have limitations in extending your strength and conditioning blocks. Because when you have to peak, then you have to stop early, you stop general conditioning. You have to push into specific conditioning before you perform and peak. If that peaking issue is kind of removed or kind of delayed to the next year, the whole year is yours. You do what you want, whatever has to be done. So that is how the under 14 issues look like if we kind of count that way in progress and in future. Now again, before I proceed to under 17, please give it a minute, give it a thought, put it in black and white and paper, let us know what are the issues which you would like to be tackled, apart from whatever has been, for instance, mentioned here. All right? Because, I repeat, whatever I'm presenting now is a kind of result of this number of years working with Nadiad Academy as consultant, but that is typically based on the academy background. I do know some issues from you guys, from coaches, that okay, certain issues are happening at DLSS, certain issues are happening and something is like working one way or another in the SSC, but I would love to have first-hand information from you guys. Directly from DLSS coaches, directly from district sports complexes and so on and so forth. Right? So please use this time, pass something to us as a kind of food for thought and something to push when we need that, right? Because it's always better to act on the first-hand information rather than on something which I possibly heard from someone who is not exactly doing that particular job, right? So please also consider it as possibilities like into the projects which we are about to share with you later. Okay, next level, next age group, under 17. This is where we start having a bit of a deviation or sort of a split between the School Games Federation of India and Federation. So, participation strategy challenges. What does it mean? So, of course, the model which I was sharing with you on under 14, under 17, and under 19 is SGFI age groups based. If we start doing the same thing or looking at the same practice from the point of view of national associations, then the age groups will be different. All right, so because in the federations we have under 16, under 18, under 20, right, if I'm not mistaken, and then under 21 or 23. So that brings an extra sort of toughness into your planning. That's particularly what I keep hearing from my coaches here in the academy. They say, okay, so what is happening in under 17? Priority issue within 1 year. So if someone is like 16 or 7 or like 15 or 16 years of age, that will not be a good idea to perform in under 17 is in GFI, but at 16 or under 16, you will have to pick that same kid, because otherwise your higher authorities may not be happy. They say, hey, you have under 16 nationals, so you have to perform there at 16. 16, however, I repeat, will not be the favorable age for under 17 SGFI. So here comes that dilemma that even though the system may be looking kind of logic, but that split in the age groups is coming into picture. So if you overlap those two, then you may say, okay, that sounds fine, but even if we are not picking at 15, we still have to pick at 16, and then we still have to pick at 17 again. All right? And in the Federation Nationals, you will be performing under 16, and then the Federation, in SGFI, under 17. So there will be priority issue emerging within 1 year or season when coaches need to actually plan picking of their athletes to either one of those competitions. Both need to pick or both. Depends on SG strategy on the medal tally. And then again, we may well step in with a suggestion and say, all right, if you longitudinally look at a particular kid, and that kid was a champion on under 14, for instance, in both nationals and the GFI. Remember, there were no conflict. But then conflicts, not a conflict, but the kind of situation emerges in the next age group. So 15 was supposed to be then kind of full protected and like no medals, no nothing in any level. For nationals or association nationals picking at 16, SGFI picking at 17, but again you are then hanging in nowhere in the nationals, fine, no issue, before you move into under 19. That we are going to discuss in a while. So then it comes a priority issue between years, but still, even though it becomes a bit more complicated, it still looks like a system then. We can say, fine,
Instead of someone explaining to you or requesting you to do this and this and that, you can say, fine, okay. Under 14 first picking, 15 years of age, kind of complete, non-exposure, complete protection, complete immunity, to re-peak at 16 for nationals, and at 17 for SGFI, right? So, on the SGFI line, there are 3 potential participations after under 14, under 15, under 16, and under 17. But we say no medal at 15, no medal at 16, only at 17. On the Federation Nationals line, there are 2 potential participations after under 14, which is at the age of 15, which we again are trying to get the full immunity, and then at the age of 16, where the authorities will rightfully request you to deliver a medal, right? So, what are the essential issues of this particular age group? Managing juniority-inferiority factor, that has been discussed already, right? The second one, adjusting to the heavier weight categories, may take a year or even longer, all right? It may take longer with light weights than expected. The one issue which I was sharing with you yesterday, particularly in boxing, in judo, in wrestling, in weight categorized sports, where you physically are in trouble with lightweight kids because you need time to make them kind of heavier. And you may need to wait till they pick up growth to make them heavier. Because again, you will ask nutritionists and they will hit the wall because the kid is of a small frame. You cannot put anything on. And that's what we were discussing kind of seriously, half seriously, like before COVID situation with our judo players here and say, okay. Then one thing I can suggest, you talk to the nutritionist and get everything you can from them, healthy way of improving weight, all right? Then when this is done and it is fully sort of utilized, then talk to me. I will suggest perhaps jokingly saying some not very healthy ways of improving the weight. Still scientific sort of. And then eventually there will be some other issue. So if that is realistically becoming an issue because of the stature or a frame, a small frame kid, you should have an opportunity to legally postpone it to the next year without even performing a kid. And then you should be able to explain to the authorities that yes, we are not fielding those group of kids next year when they are 15 at under 17 group for a simple reason. They are underweight. And we cannot forcefully put them into the heavier weight categories. This is not healthy. Sometimes it is not possible. So we need to wait till they spur, growth, height, then on a bigger height, heavier weight can be achieved. So it may take a while. And then nutrition and supplements. Weight gain is sometimes more complicated than weight loss. See, we all know and we all kind of have a good idea about weight loss. Fine. And somehow everyone knows that weight loss is typically about what? Creating a negative energy balance. So you burn more calories than you consume. But not many of us will think the same way when we are talking about weight gain. Weight gain is kind of mirror situation. You have to consume more calories than you expend, and a lot more. Again, if you try converting that into numbers or figures, every single kilogram of a muscular mass has to be supported by at least 3,600 kilocalories extra kind of energy balance. Muscles don't grow out of nowhere. You have to fuel it in with extra balance. Then they will put on more weight and more of that weight will go into muscles. Some of that weight will typically grow into fat as well. But that's how it works. So you may get them much, much, much heavier and fatter at some point, and then you start slimming them down, so you burn the fat, but muscles are still there. So we don't often think about that. So if we stick to the previous nutrition and then we suddenly decide, okay, we do more resistance training with the same food and there will be hypertrophy or muscle growth. No, it won't be. There is no kind of energy to build that muscle. So you have to provide that. And you have to provide supplementation. Typically a protein supplementation. Of course, we were discussing it with Deepak. We will have an open floor discussion on that, of course, as well. It's not that simple as it looks like, but that's what we need to consider, right? So let me know when you want to have that open discussion. And of course, our nutritionists. All right. So, issue number 1 in under 17. Transition from under 14 to under 17 age group is the most dramatic and critical in every respect. It is. Right? So what is the typical approach? Everyone wants smooth transition from under 14 to under 17. Okay, fine. We all want that. Concern. Is everyone equally safe in this transition? Not really. All right. Choices. How to perform in the senior age group, I mean under 17 now, being the youngest in it and the lightest in combat. That's what inspired me to actually develop that immunity system in the first place. Solution. Avoid competing in the first transition year. That's for sure. When the kid is 15, that is to be avoided. Just don't. Under 16 nationals, understood. Under 17 SGFI, understood, but not at 15. Conflict, however, there will be a conflict that all stakeholders sort of unhappy, because there's kind of a gap. Of course, if you, long-term planning of your talent selection, if you plan it in such a way that every year you have someone kind of filling the void, then it would be easier. But you don't always have that luxury. Sometimes, and I already heard from some DLSS coaches, you may not have new talents for years together. Not every year, not every 2 years. So that is why that is to be somehow addressed. Now, issue number 2. Tackling food habits and balancing between low caloric value food and weight gain necessity. So, food habits is not my topic. I'm not a nutritionist, although I am certified weight management consultant, but that's a different story. So it's the job of our nutritionists to do that, and trust me, they are kind of fighting that battle day in, day out. But the food habits actually are developed earlier than that. All right? I have to tell you one thing, will you be happy about it or not? But what we are seriously considering here in the Academy, that we may include nutritional habits and sort of nutritional behavior as one of the factors for weeding out. We are also planning to include certain issues and certain formulations into the document or contract, whatever you call it, when the kid is joining the academy, which will be signed by the parents, because the kid cannot sign for himself, right, being young age, underage. So it should be signed by guardians or parents that the kid may be requested to change food behaviors from veg to non-veg, from vegan to and so on and so forth. It should be actually official. And the authorities, or I mean SAG or whosoever, could be acting according to that, and parents should be in consent of that. I respect everyone's food habits, but look, and that's what typically I'm sharing that thought with my friends and colleagues, that okay, we all know that India is the greatest democracy in the world, true, but sports and high performance is not realistically about the democracy. It's about certain choices, it is about following certain procedures, certain things, and so on and so forth. Yes, there is the theory that vegetarianism is nothing different from non-vegetarianism, but that athletes can perform. Yes, they can perform. But there are also numerous studies proving that children who are vegetarians are basically slightly behind in the developmental patterns from the kids which are non. I'm not arguing about that. There is evidence of kind of on both sides. So particularly on the growth and development kind of stages, we may need to look into it. So the food habits, the food discipline. Sometimes coaches keep complaining, okay, they are not getting enough calories. We talk to the nutritionists, they said they are not eating the food which we are offering them. Then again, sort of a conflict situation. So, that is how it has to be actually figured out. Caloric value to meet the calculated kind of energy requirement. Concerns, one can't eat or can't gain weight eating low caloric density food. You cannot eat volumes, volumes, and volumes, and volumes. It's just not getting it. So, choices, nutritionally correct, high volumes of low caloric food. Is it the issue or is it the way? Not really. A solution has to be introducing high caloric density food. That's what, again, our nutritionists are doing now for the whole state. Let's see how it actually gets introduced. And then conflict is still there. Cost goes up. So financing versus nutritional recommendations. Now, seemingly, we are reaching that point where these two conditions kind of meet. And then eventually the proper adjustments can be done. Right. This is what I'm talking about. This is our kind of model plate, previous one, not the current one, not the new one. So for instance, if this is the current model plate, dinner, non-vegetarian, low-caloric food density, so you have to eat all of it to get into your caloric count, which is projected as a daily requirement. So, if this is, this is dinner, more or less is the same volume as you have to add during lunch, and a little bit different picture, of course, during breakfast. If you eat that much during lunch, and even you take your rest for about an hour or something, I bet you will be a bit heavy on the evening session, isn't it? So and these on the right side, this is volumes Academy small weight kids realistically eat. So I'm sometimes going around and taking pictures of what they grab from the counter. You got a bacha of taekwondo or someone like that, or even in judo. They pick that small food and then, why are they not putting on weight? This is why they're not putting on weight, because they cannot eat this much. If they start eating that much, they'll be like having tummies or something, and they may have even a food disorders, because volume is higher than their kind of stomach size or something like that. That's what we are facing. Yes, we could, and that way we were just jokingly and half-time serious, sometimes seriously saying, fine, you have volleyball players or you have big wrestlers and you have small, taekwondo players, so pair them. The kid, the smaller kid, will pick the big plate and the big fella will pick the big plate. You walk them together, sit them next to each other. So the bigger one eats his own and half of the small one. The small one takes whatever food, the rest is given to the big one. So then some sort of, caloric balance is maintained. But we cannot introduce that anyway. So the issue is that even that small amount of food should be high caloric. Then we are in a kind of win-win and kind of happy or reasonably happy situation. Right? The next one. Weight gain is something more complicated than weight loss. Already discussed. Right? Happening under certain circumstances, weight gain. Right? Major one is creating positive energy balance. I already mentioned that. Meaning calories consumed must be higher than calories expended. Now, if we say that you consume that many calories and we have to create a positive balance, then we say like, okay, you don't need to train too much because you are burning more calories. They say, hey, it's not an option. You have to train the way you did, that you have to produce or provide much more calories. So, secondly, if it has to be the muscle mass, but not the fat mass, hence hypertrophy training is required. Now, you need a hypertrophy training, what do? You go to strength and conditioning. And you please go to strength and conditioning, because they know exactly how to do hypertrophy training. You all know how to do resistance training with your knowledge and in relation to your game. But what about basic things? Please kind of use the services of strength and conditioning. They are trained to do right that. So, and then again, hypertrophy, extra caloric value, these are only two factors which are required. There is still one more. Which is what? Protein supplementation. We'll discuss it later, no worries. But theoretically it is that way. If these three not come together, then useless. So, again, I say we will discuss it because there are again clashes which we need to voice out. All right? So if these three are not kind of attached concurrently, it's not happening. That is what we were also again facing so many times in sports when we required it. Operational issues. We are in under 17, all right? Adjusting to new strength and conditioning demands. A kid who picked 20 centimeters of height in one academic year or one calendar year requires complete wrap-up different strength and conditioning program. Completely different. So, build up psychological supremacy. That's when we kind of approaching under 17, like 17 years of age. Reduced competitions, increased sparring, training, and competition exposure. When we discuss with SAG the issues of training and competition exposure, I've mentioned that briefly at the beginning in day one, that previously it was okay, you can utilize that many days for competing, that many days for training. However, there is always a limited number of competitions where you can take part. However, performance, which is, training exposure can go sort of unlimited. So what we suggested, and we got support from SAG on that issue, we put these two numbers together and use it as one pool. For instance, in the academy level, Group A athletes will be having 15 days for competition, 30 days for exposure. We put it as 45. And you can use it any way you want. That's what we are trying to implement in the academy. That's what we will be also trying to implement state-wise. All right? Same with Group B and so on and so forth. So then within that pool, use more training exposure, go out, invite people to your venues, train with them, spar with them, do it, and then that not necessarily officially competing. All right? Next one, building up the second peaking for the top age group performance. Again, if you only follow SGFI, 17. If you are following national calendars and grouping, age grouping, then 15 blank, 16 nationals, 17 SGFI. That will sort of make the life kind of easier. Adjusting to that new strength and conditioning demands, as mentioned, growth and development of spur. So, hence, along with increases in body weight and stature, players will have to increase the volumes and intensity of SNC. Bigger body, bigger workout. Increase in the volumes and intensity of specific training alone will not serve the purpose. See, your bigger kids, without proper adjustments in strength and conditioning, are becoming bulky. So, to improve their skills, to improve their performance, you realistically need still to address strength and conditioning issues first. Then, reshape them, use them in specific conditioning skills, and so will follow, right? Increase in the volumes and intensity of specific training alone, as I said, doesn't serve a purpose alone. Then, logic is absolutely straight. Bigger size, higher loads in strength and conditioning. If SNC is not increased, there will be deterioration in specific fitness and possibly injury proliferation. I hope our physios will agree with me. Again, growth and development, not supported with adjustments on strength and conditioning, slightly overloaded from specific fitness part, you might get it injured. Because again, there has to be adjustment, and there has to be adaptation on every level. Ligaments, tendons, muscles, everything. So that is how it actually has to be tackled. Hold on, still a little bit of time and then we are into lunch. All right. we still have to cover under 19 and under 21. Not now, though. I guess we will reschedule a bit because. All right. Psychological supremacy. I will not go much into it, right? But in order to build up psychologically, it is suggested to pick opponents of slightly lower or equal standards. This is what is important when you plan your training exposure. When you need your athletes to be sort of spared, please don't pick strong opposition. Makes no sense. Pick someone of your standard, maybe even lower than that. That's what you need to build up your kind of model performance. And you need to kind of psychologically grow. Imagine you're 15 years old kids who are juniors. You kind of say, okay, we go JSW or we go somewhere, we go to practice there. So what? They kind of punch you, beat everything out of you, and then you, okay, what was the use of it? I mean, we are kind of, okay, you might well learn something technically or tactically, but also don't forget that you also might well be psychologically down. So pick your exposure venues and opponents wisely. When you need development, pick a weaker opposition. When you are kind of strong enough, pick the equal or stronger one, right? So the level of opposition should increase gradually and reach higher standard when the final year of under 17 tenure. At 17, pick stronger opposition, get yourself exposed to equal partners so that it will bring you to where you want. Right, so this way positive feedback will be dominating and self-efficacy will be created and reaffirmed. Self-efficacy, that's what you really need to build up so that you don't face issues in competition situations. With the above factors taken care in a systematic manner, we can expect creating a perception of psychological dominance. That's what we need. We need every single kid walking into competition feeling that he is best prepared, best fit, best trained, best fed, best competed. Easy way. Go, do the job, get the medal, happily, go back home. No issues. Less competitions increase sparring, training, and competition exposure. That's what the idea is. Competing, particularly at 15 and 16, with older, more experienced opponents may not always be a good experience physically, technically, and tactically. Hence, it may be more relevant to spend some time in sparring, training, exposures, rather than in competition exposures. Meanwhile, more training time will be dedicated to technical, tactical aspects of performance. Again, skills, technique, tactics, strategizing, getting ready for bigger tasks and bigger objectives. New skills rather be masters based on new level of physical fitness. You know that skill is always related to fitness anyway, whether you like it or not. Some people, years ago people say, okay, we are badminton players, why do we need to do bench press? Why not? Look at it a different manner. Every single shot is not just a speed thing, it's a power as well. You look at the power curve in sports, you find, okay, the heaviest implement possible is in where? Weightlifting, right? Power. The next will be what? The group of throwers, shot putters, power. Implement is lighter. But there is still power in shot put, which is almost 8 kilos of weight, discus, which is 2, and then javelin, which is whatever weight is. So it's still a component of power. Component of power is in a hockey shot. The ball weights particular, 300 something grams, I don't remember. It's also power. Tennis is also power. Tennis ball is lighter, but there is a degree of power. And then badminton is also power. Table tennis is also a bit of power, although the curve kind of goes that way, all right? Kind of strength-speed relationship. So if you agree with the fact that your badminton player or even table tennis player requires some power, you still have to go through strength and conditioning issues, which will be differently planned, but they still should be addressed, all right? So that is again physically, technically kind of exposures, right? So again, last one, based on new level of physical fitness. Your physical fitness improves, your skill is also having to adjust to that. And again, you know that better than anyone else. Your body is getting into fatigue. What goes first? Your skill deteriorates. If your physical conditioning is at the higher level, you can survive longer time in the match without deterioration in skills. Right? So, building up for the second peaking, next age group, all right, top performance. 3 of the factors be taken care. Gradual, systematic, build up to under 17 peak. What is important, not to run for the non-essential competitions. So, you can take part, participate. Of course, it's also our job to convince the authorities, like I was mentioning before, that not every competition is to be won. Certain to be lost, certain to be practiced, and then certain to be kind of delivered performance. So it's not every time you participate, you just are a winner. Not necessarily, right? Not to try to be the best every season, right? Spread the objectives within 3 years of the age group in the optimum way so that every aspect of training is addressed in the 2 opening years, whereas the 3rd year will become the high performance year. Again, SGFI. Nationals, 16 also to be considered. All right. That is about the under 14 and under 17. There's still under 19 and under 21. I'm not sure how I will plan that, but that most probably is happening after lunch. All right? Thank you, guys. So, comments, talks, discussions, anything? Or okay, maybe Deepak, maybe you want to talk about the project, using opportunity, or we are not yet ready?